tribes and nations of Native American people. It was mostly home to the Council of Three Fires. That's the Potawatomi, Odawa, and Ojibwe people. And we owe them a great deal. You know, they were the caretakers of this land for hundreds of years. They helped DuSable navigate the landscape, and they gave us our name. Because Chicago actually comes from a French translation, Chicago, of a Potawatomi word, Chicago, which roughly translates to mean, man, this river really stinks. That's true. We had someone from the Potawatomi tribe give us that actual translation. They thought the river smelled because there used to be a wild species of ramp that grew in abundance around the river. That's like a leek. It smells like onions or garlic. And so it smelled like a stinky onion. That's another translation. You'll often hear river of the stinky onion. Neither of them are great, which is why we don't put them on our t-shirts. But as we make our way onto the river of the stinky onion, we're going to watch the curtain rise. A little chilly today, but it's going to warm up a bit more the further away from the lake we get. We got beautiful views though, nice clear skies, so let's get down to business. Now we're competing with the sun, but we're going to start here to the left with this eye-catching skyscraper, blue, green, and wavy like 3 stairs up into the clouds. This is the St. Regis, and the St. Regis is a high-end residence and hotel. Emphasis on the high-end. I got some good news. For any of you looking to relocate to Chicago, you can rent a 5-bedroom, 4-bathroom apartment in the St. Regis for only $35,000 a month. So, crack open your thinking caps. Now, there's a lot we can talk about with the St. Regis, but I think the coolest thing we should talk about first. Now, it is the 3rd tallest building in Chicago, number 3. But it is also currently the tallest building in the world, designed by a woman. Absolutely worthy of celebration. Her name is Jeannie Gang, and she runs the local architecture firm Studio Gang. And Studio Gang is kind of crushing it right now. They're working on an $8.5 billion renovation of O'Hare International Airport. But they're responsible for this next building as well. If you stay on the left, you'll see the silver and black stripes of the Swiss Hotel. It's that angled building here on the left. And above and behind it, in just a moment, you'll see another building coming into view. There it is. The top right corner of a building that looks like it's covered in wavy white fins. So those fins are all balconies, and each one of them is uniquely shaped, so that when you stand next to this building at the ground level and you look up at the side of it, the balconies look like rippling waves of water cascading down the side of it. That gives the building its name, which is Aqua Tower. And even though Aqua is kind of blocked by this other building here, I like to point it out because when it was finished in 2009, it was the tallest building in the world designed by a woman, Jeannie Gang. So when she finished the St. Regis, she just beat her own record. She's got number 1 and number 2 right here in Chicago, about a block apart from each other, which I think is pretty cool. Now we're going to talk more about the St. Regis on our way back to the dock, but right now I want to shift gears and I want to go down low because we got to talk about the Chicago River that we're on right now. Now we are currently traveling west away from Lake Michigan, and that is the same direction the water flows. So the water flows away from the lake. Now, if you remember your middle school science class, you're probably confused because that's not what rivers do. Rivers flow into the nearest body of water, not away from it. Well, that's what this river did for thousands of years. Until 1900, it flowed in the opposite direction, emptying into the lake. So how and why did it reverse? Well, we got to go back to the beginning once more. So when Chicago started in the 1780s, pretty much all the way until the 1970s, we used this river as our sewer and our trash dump. So we were putting all our sewage and all our trash in the river, which is gross. And that was very bad for Lake Michigan because the water was emptying into the lake. But it was even worse for the people who lived here because the city was using Lake Michigan as their number 1 source of drinking water. Yeah. We were drinking our sewage, in case that wasn't clear. So that was really bad. In 1892, the Army Corps of Engineers came to Chicago to save us. And you might be thinking, that was so nice of the Army Corps of Engineers to clean up the river. That's not what they did. They reversed the flow, so we sent our polluted water somewhere else. They dug a 28-mile channel from the south branch of the river, connecting this river to a series of rivers that empty into the Mississippi River. And by digging that channel on a downward slope, they just used gravity to permanently pull the water in the opposite direction away from Lake Michigan, saving our drinking water and making this the only river on planet Earth that flows backwards. And that saved us from being known as one of the cholera capitals of the world, which is, you know, when it comes to a tagline for your tourism campaign, it's not a very good one. So thank you, Army Corps of Engineers. Well, we got to get back to some buildings. Up ahead on the right, this light-colored stone building with the clock tower on the roof. This is a Chicago favorite, the iconic Wrigley Building. If you've ever heard of Wrigley's Juicy Fruit or Big Red Chewing Gums or Wrigley Field where the Chicago Cubs baseball team plays, that's all the same Wrigley. William Wrigley was his name. We called him the Chewing Gum Magnate because, of course, that's how he made his millions. In fact, this building was built entirely out of chewing gum. Profits. Okay. Listen, the jokes aren't going to get much better, folks, so brace yourselves. The Wrigley was finished in 1924. It was modeled specifically after La Giralda Cathedral in Sevilla, Spain. So we call this style of architecture Spanish Revival style. A lot of European influences in our early architecture. But right now we're going to jump ahead to the 2000s so we can talk about the second tallest building in Chicago, right here in front of us. And I bet you can't guess what this one's called. Trump International Hotel and Tower from 2009, designed by Chicago's very own Skidmore, Owings and Merrill architecture firm. We call them SOM, a world-famous architecture firm based here in Chicago. And this building is a really good example of a style of architecture known as contextualism. And let me break down that style for you. You'll notice 3 patio setbacks at various heights along the building, 2 on the right and 1 on the left. This first one on the right is at the same height as the roof of the Wrigley Building that we just talked about. That one up on the left, same height as the roof of that domed building across the river that looks like a wedding cake, the jeweler's building. And then that one up there on the right, same height as the roof of the boxy black building on the other side. So contextualism is a form of site-specific design, where you design a building to be in relationship with the area that surrounds it. And the cool thing is that can be literally anything nearby that inspires the architect. Other buildings, the river, the sky, trees, anything. Now, the lead architect on Trump Tower, very famous man by the name of Adrian Smith, and he's often called the world's tallest architect. Yeah, he's only 5'7". It's a confusing nickname. But he did design the world's tallest building, which we'll talk about later. So see if you can remember that name, Adrian Smith. It will pop up later on the tour. I did warn you. I'm a teacher, going for comprehension and retention. Here on the right, though, 2 of the most photographed structures in the entire city, we have what we call the twin corncob towers of Marina City. Now, Marina City was designed by architect and visionary social scientist Bertrand Goldberg and built in the 1960s. Now, we talked about how we reversed the flow of the river, but we did not stop polluting it. We didn't stop till the 70s. So in the 60s, this river smelled awful, and no one lived down here. But Goldberg wanted to change that. He wanted people to live downtown. The problem was there was no support for it. No restaurants, no entertainment, nor to wash your clothes. So we had to put all of it in this complex. He designed the country's first mixed-use residential skyscraper complex, or what we call a city within a city. So let's imagine for a moment, it's the 1960s. You want to move into Marina City, this is what you're going to get. First, you'll move in upstairs where you do have to furnish a pie slice-shaped apartment, which is tough. But then you're going to live above your valet-parked car, your parked yacht, because who doesn't have a yacht, a restaurant, movie theater, bowling alley, shops, office space, fitness center, laundry facility, and an ice skating rink. A city within a city. I've been doing this long enough, I know that many of you are wondering if anyone's ever driven a car off one of those balconies into the river. Yeah. Well, the answer is, this is America. Of course we did. On purpose. The movie The Hunter, Steve McQueen drove a car off of one of those balconies into the river. It was an iconic action scene. You can look it up on YouTube. But Marina City was such a success that Goldberg began to change our attitude towards the river. We began to embrace it. We continued to build alongside it, as you can clearly see. But more importantly, we cleaned it up. And by 2016, we sealed the deal when we finished our gorgeous Riverwalk here to the left. Our Riverwalk is 1.3 miles long. It travels along the entire length of the main branch of the river. It cost $112 million, but it was worth every penny. The architect who designed it, her name is Carol Ross Barney, and she designed each section to have its own distinct purpose and personality. This is my favorite section to the left. She calls this the River Theater. And for a long time, I did not know why she called it that until last summer I took my dog out there for a few hours. We sat down and I realized, oh, the river is the show. Tour boats, party boats, kayaks, yachts, all kinds of action happening here on the river. In fact, this year, the newest boat you can float down the river on, hot tub boats. Yeah, you can float down the river in a hot tub. And Chicagoans were doing it in January, because what else are you going to do in January in Chicago except float down the river in a hot tub, apparently? But I highly recommend you explore the Riverwalk, folks. It is really stunning. Free shops, bars, restaurants, all up and down its banks. But cool photo opportunity, folks, with the L train in action above the Wells Street Bridge right in front of us. This is one of 4 double-decker bridges. Now, I said it's called the L train. Does anyone here know why it's called the L? Elevated. Very good, because many of the tracks are elevated above street level, as you can see on the Wells Street Bridge. I'm a big fan of the train. That's how I get around the city. I don't have a car because I don't need one. So you can get a day pass. So for 24 hours, unlimited train and bus rides for only $5. It's really, really worth it. So if you want to get around the city, check out the train. It's not that scary. Coming in to be on the right, gigantic monster of a building. It occupies 2.5 city blocks, has 43 elevators, 7.5 miles of hallway, 73 American-sized football fields of office space. Until 2008, this building had its own zip code. This is the massive merchandise mark from 1929, and it's the first example of our first all-American style of architecture, called Art Deco. Now let me point out the 3 most common features of the Art Deco style. You'll see them beautifully on this building. First, you have inset windows which create vertical stripes, and then it's covered in machine-stamped repetitive patterns and polished Indiana limestone. That's your Art Deco style. Now, this was a style tailor-made to the roaring 1920s. That was a decade of optimism, opulence, and luxury here in the U.S. I always like to joke in 1929 in the U.S. we were like, woo, we're rich, nothing bad will ever happen to us. Definitely not in October of this year. So that style was created to express that optimism, but folks, soak it in, because we have reached Wolf Point, the crown of the Chicago River, where the 3 branches of the river meet. Now, that building, built in the past 8 years. So this is some of the most modern architecture that you will find anywhere in the city. Tall, blue glass skyscrapers, sleek, reflective, and futuristic looking, like Salesforce Tower, the newest building here, finished last summer. A lot of these have really unique shapes. This curvy building to the left we'll talk about later. How about that one behind the Lake Street Bridge with that narrow Y-shaped base? It looks like it's gonna blow over. We will definitely talk about that in a little bit. And we even have skyscrapers that look like giant sticks of deodorant, or Hot Pockets, or McDonald's cherry pie boxes. You guys get the point. Really unique shapes to these modern buildings. But enough about all this new stuff, because I want to take you back to 1898 to show you the oldest building that we'll see on our tour today. And I am talking about this kind of unremarkable pink brick box up ahead on the left. Now, it is pretty standard looking, but it's got great history. So this is the historic Fulton House, finished in 1898 as a cold storage freezer building for the meatpacking industry. Now, because it was a freezer building, it originally had no balconies and just a few windows, because it was an insulated box, right? But this is where it gets interesting. In the 70s, the meatpacking business that operated in Fulton House closed down. They sold the building and moved out. And when the builders got inside to renovate it for the new owners, it took them over 3 months to defrost the building, because they cut into the walls and discovered they were 4 feet thick and they were packed with cork and horsehair, which was an early version of insulation before styrofoam was invented. But you can rest easy. Buildings are vegan once again. You cannot put horsehair in the walls anymore. It's a little creepy, if I'm being honest. Now in the 70s, the windows and balconies were cut into the building and it was converted into a residential structure. But what's cool about this building is if you look at the balconies, you can see that they're about 4 feet deep. That's because they utilize those 4-foot thick walls for their balconies. But we have another really rich bit of history to the right, that majestic looking raised bridge. This is the old Carroll Avenue Railroad Bridge. Finished in 1908, at the time it was the largest bridge of its kind in the world. It was decommissioned in 2001 because they didn't need the train tracks on it anymore. And in 2008, it was deemed a Chicago landmark. So that means you cannot tear it down unless you want to fill out a lot of paperwork. But this shows you how these bridges operate. So you see that chunk of concrete on the right? That's called the counterweight. Every bridge has a counterweight, but most of them, it's hidden in the side of the river. This one you can actually see it is fully exposed. Now, they do say that they lower this bridge once a year for maintenance to make sure it's still safe. None of us have ever seen it, so I'm guessing it's probably at like 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. But pretty cool, very historic bridge, a little bit of public art, public education. But now I get to show you my favorite building on the river. I would love to live in this building someday. I need to make peace with the fact that I will not. Here to the left, shaped like a triangle, covered in triangles, we have the River Cottages. 4 very unique townhomes from 1988, designed by architect Harry Weiss. And Harry was obsessed with sailboats. Can you tell? It's covered in triangles, like sails, and it even has round porthole-like windows that you find on a boat. This is a really good example of postmodernism. That is a style of architecture that you can think of as like the abstract art of architecture. Very whimsical, playful. These buildings tell a story. The story here, Harry loved sailing. Now, the 4 of those sold for between $300,000 and $600,000 back in 1988 when they first sold. One of them resold in 2015 for $2.25 million, and the other 3 are still owned by the original owners. And the reason why people held on to those properties is because we finally cleaned up the river. And I'm going to tell you how he did that in just a few minutes, but first, our Captain Rambo is going to make a U-turn up here on the North Branch. We're going to head back down through Wolf Point onto the South Branch, where there's a lot more to talk about. I'm going to give the Kinsey Park Townhomes a break from my voice and get off the mic for just a few short minutes. So I'll be here in the aisles. If you have any questions, raise your hand, let me know. I'm happy to answer those. Otherwise, visit Jordan at the bar, hit up the bathroom, stretch your legs, take some photos. I'll be back on the mic in just a few short minutes.